Director of the Big Valley Band of Pomo Indians, and I've been there for 17 years, worked for them on environmental protection projects, natural resource protection, so it's water quality, tules, birds, basically the things that are really important to the tribes to use and care about. It's part of their identity, part of their culture, and it benefits all of us, I've noticed over time, if we're taking care of those things, because those are things that maintain the diversity here in Lake County in terms of the environment. So I'm here with Corolla Kennedy, who's the environmental director at Elem Indian Colony. She just rushed back from a meeting on the Superfund site. Elem is right next to, and actually has property on the Superfund site, so she's going to speak a little bit about it today and to answer some questions about it. It's also her birthday, so... I guess I should have had like sombreros, but yeah. So she I guess you were up at 6 a.m. to get to Sacramento. Yeah.
If you have any wind left afterwards, I'll buy you a margarita or whatever.
There you go.
Did you get some cake?
Yeah, cake.
Let's eat it too.
So we put together these series of meetings after that horrible fish kill happened earlier this summer, where it came in waves, and at some point, every time you looked out your window onto your shoreline, you saw dead fish of all kinds that were stinking. Nobody was picking them up, and people were worried about it. As a staff member for a tribe, we get lots of phone calls about what's going on out there, because I feel that Big Valley and Elem and some of the other tribes are really responsive to the things that are happening in the environment. I think people see it sort of as a natural fit. Maybe in the old days people, or 10 years ago, 15 years ago, people thought of tribes and maybe they thought of casinos, but there's a lot of environmental work that we're doing because number one, we do apply for and get some grants that maybe the county can't get, so it gives us a little bit of extra edge and extra money to be able to do projects. But also, like I said, we really want to protect the water quality, the tules, the birds, the habitat for the other wildlife that is really important to the tribes. I know, as I'm not native, I grew up in Virginia, came out west after college, and when in the things that I participated in for the tribes with Big Valley, the cultural things I participated in made me realize and appreciate their care for the land. Because they have such close connections to it. When they're dancing, they're breathing in dust, on the ground, and they're using feathers that might have come from birds that have lead poisoning. There's a lot of reasons why you want to keep things safe, especially if children are using them. In any case, we have some pretty big programs, and you might have heard about the cyanotoxin monitoring program we've been doing on Clear Lake since 2014. We have a couple of posters around regarding the sites that we go to. We go to about 18 sites every other week for basically all of spring through fall, looking at the toxins that are sometimes produced by blue-green algae or cyanobacteria. The reason why that's an important type of monitoring that we do is, first of all, the county wasn't doing it, nobody was doing it on Clear Lake, it's the largest natural lake in California. But we also wanted to get to the point of how do we back out of this thing where we've got cyanobacteria blooms and nobody can enjoy the lake anymore. Could be even dangerous to go in. 70% of the county gets their drinking water from Clear Lake. So it really makes sense when you're thinking about an environmental protection program that you're looking at not only the kind of the toxic things that are going on, but how to stop it from happening. There's been a lot of studies, there's a little bit of work here and there. Those of you who've lived here for many years also realize, gosh, we've seen, everybody's been talking about it forever, no one's ever done anything. Well, so this is why we put together the town forums around the lake, and we can certainly do more, and we are going to actually, we're creating an action list from these 3 meetings of the different types of activities that people have brought up that they're interested in, and we want to have follow through as a community, as a tribal staff person, working after hours. I don't get paid for that, but it all kind of blends in with what we really care about, which is the water quality and the health of the lake and the land. So in today's meeting, we want to go over some of the questions that were on the flyer that I have some more copies right here, but it's a flyer on that we put all over Facebook. that and handed to some local papers. I don't think they put it in the paper, but we put on there questions like, what are, why do the fish kills happen? Who's in charge here? What does watershed management look like? And then we wanted to generate some discussion about different activities that we could do here in terms of like specific things like tule replanting, and also some policy changes that we think need to happen because of our own work with water monitoring and the things that we know are contributing to the pollution, and changes that need to happen at the county level to fix it. So we want to be able to get all of those. Before I go into a long soliloquy, I should let you speak and introduce yourself, because I just sort of rambled through that.
Introduce me, Cortland Kennedy. I'm the environmental director at Elem Indian Colony. As Sarah said, we've been doing the monitoring on the lakes with cyanotoxins since 2014. That's actually the year I started here in Lake County and at Elem. And yeah, it's been a ride throughout it. It's a beautiful area, beautiful lake, and I think it just needs more attention. And I think as people that live here, I think that's where it's going to come from. Is the people here and the changes here. But I'd love to do introductions through the room, or have people introduce through.
Yeah, if we can do a brief, like 1 minute per person. Your name. Hopefully everyone has signed in the sign-in sheet. If not, hit it before you leave. But if everyone we could start here and just say your name, maybe what town you're from, and anything you want to share about you and the lake, like, well, I've lived here for 45 years, or I've seen some changes, but we'll just try to keep it short so we can move into the next phase. So, would you like to decide?
Sure. I'm Mary Beth Altimeter. I live in over in Oak Cove on the water, and you actually came out to our house, I think 2 years ago when there was a fish on.
Could you show us where that is on the map?
Oak Cove.
Because I don't know where everything is around the lake. I live in
Right
Lakeport, but I don't know
here,
anything else.
right there.
Oh,
okay.
down in the
Thank
lower arm.
Yeah.
Right.
Where am I?
Clearlake.
Oh, yeah.
You're down about
Right
in
down.
here.
Yeah, as long as
Just
I
past
put
your
your
state water.
I don't even know where I live.
Yeah, it's right down in there.
Okay.
In there. So that's the lower arm?
It is in the lower arm,
Okay.
but it's in the Clearlake, Clearlake, what do they call it? Not Keys, but
It's Oak Cove.
Oak Cove, yeah, and it's
Pacific Cove, yeah.
it's part of the city of Clearlake. But
Yeah. Anyway, I just have a lot of concerns about the quality, and I'm just really appreciative that the tribal people are doing, are working on it, because that's our main thing in our whole county is our lake and the volcano, of course. But it's just really important. And then when I saw that recent article about waiting for 20 years before they even want to look at doing anything, it freaked me out. So, and these are my friends that actually live in Nevada City, but I'll let them speak for themselves, but they came all the way here for this meeting.
Oh, wow.
That's how much they care.
Wow. Thank you for coming.
So I guess that's enough for me.
Thanks. Thanks for sharing.
My husband Ken and I, and Joanne Brown, own property right by Mary Beth in Oak Cove. It's been in my family since 1952. And we too were just horrified when we heard about the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Board possibly delaying their compliance date for another 10 or 20 years. And so I've been reading everything I can about AB 707, which might create the Clearlake Blue Ribbon Committee to study the issue. And we're here. It's a second home for us here, but it's part of our history.
That's so awesome that you came.
So I'm Ken Brown, and we had a cap and cabin in '09. The water was looking pretty good. So we rebuilt, and every year it's gone downhill.
So it might be our fault.
Yeah, we got 3 sons. Last year, one got sick, one ended up in the hospital because of cyanobacteria.
Oh, I've heard about you then.
Okay. From the
Maybe my
public
wife
health
talked
officer.
to you.
Well, no, we get information about sometimes potential illnesses from the public health officer. No names were shared or anything, but it's okay.
Yeah, no, he really got sick.
Adult children that got ill, right?
Yes,
Okay.
in their 30s, and
Yeah.
he was so ill, he literally says he'll never come back here again. He thought he was going to die.
Well, you had to go to the ER.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
he had such abdominal distress that,
And I don't know how far back you go, but Pat Brown was a governor at one time, and they were gonna run the Eagle into this lake, which would have been monumental, because it would have helped flow and cool the water a little bit. And politics, it was gonna go somewhere else, and then they blew up what they had and never proceeded. That would have really made a huge difference. So,
it's a,
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Daniel Green. I was born here. I grew up in Lower Lake till I was about 5 and lived in Kelsville until 17. Came back around 28 and 31 now. So I've got to see a good evolution of the lake. Definitely much better in my youth. They like to say it's been like this forever, but it's dramatically worse, obviously.
Yes.
And from what I've learned, being around, just like being into a green and sustainable kind of lifestyles and permaculture, how we could apply these to the lake. And I see there actually is things that can be done, and we can meet the compliance if we actually took action. So, yeah, that's what I want to do.
Taking action, you're right? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Fairlight. I am on Phoenix with Danny, and one of the things that Phoenix is all about is about regenerative lifestyles and grassroots economy, and it feels like there's opportunity in here somewhere, specifically for people like Danny and her to support that.
My name is Mel English, and I retired here in 2010, and bought a house and thought this was the best place in the world, you know. And now I'm wondering if I should be going back to Bakersfield, you know, because it's becoming quite a disaster area. I mean, I've never seen the death of fish like I've seen here. It's unbelievable. This year it's been at least 5 fish die-offs that I know of. And I remember going across the lake and all I could see was fish floating. So it's very depressing.
I'm glad that you are kind of keeping track of numbers like that, and that's something that's important for all of us to be doing as we move forward is, and we talked about it in some of the other sessions too, is let's see if we can develop a couple of timelines for some of these things. Fish kills, you know, what kind, how many, what's happened in terms of vineyards going in and other agriculture, what's happened. Hi, come on in, there's chairs. Oh, okay. So yeah, it's, and for those who have been paying attention to that type of stuff, I'd love to pick your brain and start getting some stuff written down so that we can show the Central Valley Regional Board, you know, you might have this thing in place, but it's only been getting worse. Yes.
And that was a request I just got today when I was speaking to her on the phone, coming back here, was that she is taking it up the chain of command, and her bosses actually have been asking about like the recent fish kill and what happened with, you know, the guts, and they did go to Greenwater Lab along
We
with
sent
water
off the
samples.
guts of the dead
And,
stinky catfish to
but she would like to see a chronology put together along with the data that we've been accumulating for the past 4 years to see what kind of trends and tie-ins there are, which will always help with remediation. So, that information, like Sarah said, it's going to be very useful for us. You know, we can trace back some of the fish kills, but there's a lot of them that are getting missed. And I think a lot of people, it's almost become just normal now, where people don't say anything about it because it's like, oh, it always happens. And I'm fearful when it gets to that stage.
Has it always happened?
That's what I hear from people, but I hear back and forth, you know, so, but yeah. But not to the extreme that it's happened this year, that's for sure, yeah.
Well, not to interrupt, but if we do see witness a kill, then is this should we call off this card?
That card or mine, I do have some of my cards too, but yeah, that's Sarah Ryan's card, yeah.
Yeah, and we also, if you've been on Facebook, we have a page called Clearlake Water Quality. It's 2 words, Clear Lake, not the city, but the lake. And we post all of our cyanotoxin results on there. We ask people for pictures of fish kills, and it's sort of a central repository about lake stuff. It's kind of become that for the past couple of years. Not everybody uses Facebook, of course, but that's where we're at with it right now. really easy to do it like that.
You can just email
But sir, if you
her.
want to,
My name's Bill Cortland. I'm 67 years old, and I've been coming up here since I was 6 months old. My uncle owned a resort about 4 doors down from here. This was our Disneyland. I mean, we worked this lake. I mean, it was just, always had green water, but I mean, it was just, we did everything here. And to see it start dying, you know, when my children were growing and I still brought them up, and we had to go and hunt for a place that was clear enough to play in the water. The only thing I could see that was changing at all was walnut trees were coming out and grapes were going in. And never ever was it addressed that the vineyards had anything to do with what we're experiencing now. There was, I forget, maybe 10 years ago, all of a sudden the name of a vineyard came up, that's a possibility, and that was the first time, and the phosphates, and that's the first time I ever heard anything in, you know, connection with them. And for the county officials to watch this lake die like this, I think, you know, how do they look at themselves in the mirror in the morning to know that if somebody's getting paid off, or somebody's, you know, they're thinking that we got too much money from the vineyards, we can't, you know, say anything to them to piss them off. It just blows me away that this beautiful, you know, it has nothing to do with the grapes. This is Clear Lake. You know, that's what it's all based about, is this lake. And they're, you know, allowing it to die. And I know if I wanted to start a winery tomorrow, there'd have to be some kind of permit process I'd have to go through. Do they have anything that says anything about how to control your runoff from this property? You know,
yeah, they have.
it all comes
Pest
back
management
into the lake.
practices.
Everything does. And we got grapes totally encompassing this lake. And, you know, it's a sad, sad day. I don't know.
You know, I agree, and the thing is, the planting and growing of grapes is not where they get taxed. You don't get all that revenue. It's where the wine is produced. So the county's doesn't have the gold mine and all these.
No.
No, they're not getting anything from that.
Well,
And it did trigger it.
It's the socializing of the environmental burden, so they're taking up groundwater, there's, you know, spewing out pollutants, but they're privatizing the resource, you know, the end result, so it's a little bit of an odd.
But the runoff, isn't there any regulation on that? You know, to purify this before it
There
goes?
is, but you have to, nobody's going around checking it. You actually have to report it. And we'll talk about that today. Matter of fact, on this sheet, who are the players involved in Clear Lake, at the bottom I have enforcements about how to file an environmental complaint. It's always good to get something in writing over to the state, because that wakes them up to situations that they wouldn't know otherwise. And actually, you know, we work with this stuff every day, and I am, you know, I'm more than happy, and I have some wonderful staff. Matter of fact, there's one of them here right now, Latrell Lacey, who works for us at Big Valley, and she inputs all of our environmental monitoring data. And so data is really important, and complaints, if you see stuff happening, but it's really important to get that in. But I would love to work with people this winter about what to look for. You know, what can you report? What are some of the things that you're seeing? We brought the map so that people can actually put some stickies up there of some of the issues. We, you know, hot spots of where they're seeing a lot of runoff. We've spoken at the last couple of meetings about actually doing some monitoring this winter at the first flush time. So it's when you start to see when the water is really starting to run, and you start to see it moving down the creeks. And that's when you pick up the phosphorus. And so if we can show that there's some locations, because the county has not been able to do it, if we start to show some locations that it's really bad what's coming off there, then that's when action can happen, because we've got proof, you know, we've got data. So,
One last thing.
Yes.
And I don't want to take but if anybody was at that Lakeport meeting that the water board put together, and they sent 3 secretaries, nobody from the water board other than 3 secretaries came with no recorders or anything, and they're supposed to go, no, you know, board members should have been there to you know, to address this problem, and they stayed in the shadows. They want a 10 and 20-year extension on this. You know, it's just a bureaucratic bunch of crap that they keep shoveling off, and by the time they shovel it, the new guy will be in there, you know, because they're all retired. It's just one thing, the point I'm trying to make is we don't have the water board behind us, you know, on our side. And you think that would be somebody that should, but they don't care. And I think this is where it's all going to happen with the people.
Just one
I
more,
absolutely agree
I don't leave it too much, but in
Can
Oak Grove,
we finish the identification?
Okay, yeah,
just one,
okay.
we would
And then-
have 100 grapes in Oak Grove in an afternoon. This year I've seen 2. So things are being affected.
All right, yeah,
Hi, I'm Kathleen, and I live in Lakeport, which is over there. If you're not familiar with the county. Not everybody knows where everything
can you
is.
show us on the map now?
Sure.
Lakeport.
Yeah,
This area.
the only areas I really know anything about are Lakeport and then the Whispering Pines area, Cobb. That's it. I moved here from San Francisco in 2003. I've lived in Northern California my whole life. I am very, very concerned about all these issues. When I first moved here, I worked as extra help in a few different county departments and got a pretty good look at how things go. And I want to be able to do something about it. I don't want to just sit and complain. I want to be part of the proactive
Solution.
and part of that, I'm
We need a solution.
very much into knowledge management, data-driven, proof, metrics, all of that stuff. You have to have the proof to show and say, look. And so I want to be part of that.
Okay, I'm Ruth Stierna, and this is my husband John. We're here. We live in Hidden Valley Lake. If you know where that is, it's like 14 miles south of here on 29. We're not around Clearlake, but I'm a nature photographer, and I make that my business. And I'm working on a project to document the lake, and I'm interested in the water quality and concerned about the water quality. And we've only been here 2 years from Virginia.
That's where I'm from.
We're going to have to talk. We lived there for 45 years. Our daughter lives in San Francisco, and our 3 granddaughters, we came out here to be closer to them. And so I'm interested in more information and getting up to speed on what's going on.
Thanks, Ruth, and I recognize your name too.
We talked on Facebook.
That's right.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks, Ruth.
Are you, excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt, are you documenting, besides like lovely pictures, are you documenting troublesome pictures as well?
Yes, I'm not afraid of the trouble.
Okay, good. I just wanted to, that's good. I'm glad that you are. You know, you can see it through your photographer's lens.
Yes.
I'm John Stierna. I go with this young lady, but I'm very interested and concerned with quality of water in the lake. But I think it's extremely important that it be based on objective monitoring, factual material. That is needed before you can assume the kind of changes that really would make a difference. So I would encourage, I'd like to find out more about what's going on in terms of monitoring. And there's different kinds of water quality monitoring, and the more that can be better clarified to see what sources are coming from where, that would be beneficial.
Absolutely. On Big Valley's webpage, it's bvrancheria.com. We compiled all of the water quality data that's been collected on Clearlake over a 50-year period. So we know what analytes have been monitored, who is doing it, the exact location, and you can go onto our website and go to the environmental department, to the water quality dashboard, and you can see everything that's been collected that was publicly available. So it's a Superfund information, some of the tribal data, Department of Water Resources at the state level, California Department of Food and Ag, and a few other agencies whose data is on there. So we can actually see not only the results over time, but also where the gaps are. And there's not a lot of monitoring in the creeks, and there's also not been, what the state has done is monitored the center of each arm of the lake for the last 60 years, here, here, and here. And that really doesn't have a lot to do with recreation. We monitor all around the shoreline with our federally approved quality assurance plan. And you're absolutely right. If you don't have a consistent standard approach and a developed monitoring plan, then it's just going to be willy-nilly. We've seen some people waste a lot of money on creek monitoring when they didn't really have a plan in place. And so you can't really compare, because you're checking for one thing, but nobody else is checking for that, and you only do it once. So it's important to not only know who's doing what, but also be doing something with the data. And so I agree with you. And actually, the conversations about data, Kath mentioned as well, is something that we could meet later and talk about and look at. I mean, especially if you've got interest in it, look at. Look at what we have and what's out there, and if you have suggestions on things, we'd love to hear it, because we want to do some nutrient monitoring this winter at locations where we see hot spots happening, and then do some totally replanting, some restoration projects, or recommend that for the county or the cities to take on, and then of course you measure afterwards to see the benefits. We already know at Big Valley we've done a lot of tule replanting. It definitely makes a difference. And actually, in terms of policy changes, there are some things that we want to talk about today with regard to new development and parking lots going in, and what you need to do to capture the stormwater, to clean it before it goes into the lake. We have one of those at Big Valley. We have a buffer pond lined with tules and willows, and the stormwater that comes into it is in much better shape before it goes out into the lake. So there's some obviously tried and true ways to settle the particulates and kill off bacteria, because it's being held, and ultraviolet light's doing that before it goes into the lake. So there's some tried and true stuff that we need to make policy changes in terms of what the county is approving, and that will definitely be something that improves the water quality. But we can talk about that further too. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
My name is Pauline. I moved here in October 2007 from, I was raised in San Leandro, East San Francisco. I moved here sight unseen, but spent 8 years in Lower Lake, and about a mile as the Great Heron flies from Anderson Marsh. I would consider the Audubon Society crazy if they didn't have a chapter here. Just the wildlife here. I volunteer with Citizens Caring for Clearlake in the city of, and found out about this meeting, and it seems to me whatever is being grown, I mean, it's agricultural based, this county, and whatever is being grown by whoever, and whatever human activity is happening here, this does not cease to amaze me daily, how old this place is, and the first peoples, how long they took care of it and drew from its richness and did not damage the ecology here. So no doubt we got to clean up the lake, and I want to do whatever I can to plant tules. I'm in on that. I heard about it from California Coastal Cleanup.
Oh, good. Yeah, we had some of the flyers there.
My name is Holger Yos. I've been here for more than 30 years. I remember what the lake was like when I first came here. Children swimming in the lake. The lake was covered with boats. There were tourists here. There were all kinds of events going on. It was exciting to be here. This place is dead as a doorknob. And I feel cheated. I want something to be done. And I found out that Lake Tahoe is getting $2 billion, almost $2 billion to clean up that. It's with the rich people. And we are the poor peons. We get fucked over. I'm just sick of it.
Yeah. Well, the Congress sees Tahoe as a national treasure. Clearlake is not. Yeah. I mean, they see, the feds see Clearlake as damaged because it has a Superfund site, because of the Bradley family and the Bradley mining. So we have to get into the, powers that be to want to take care of this lake, but starting locally.
I keep it gone for a lawsuit right there. It's discrimination against poor people. This is a poor area,
Yeah.
When the rich people get the money, that's not right.
That's a good point. Yes.
Hi, I'm Lolita Adrian Dunlap, and moved here in 2004 with my husband. And I used to go swimming every day. I used to love to swim in the lake. It was wonderful. Now I'm very hesitant about it. I have to go out and check the water quality before I get in the water. I live on the Sulphur Bank Peninsula that bifurcates the two lower ends of the lake on the north side. And I think my frustration is with the Watershed Protection District that does nothing, and lake bed management that does nothing, and it seems like it's only the citizens of Lake County who are going to be able to do anything to protect the lake. And I mentioned to you, Sarah, about my brother in Florida, and he's part of a citizen group that's government. Swamp. And he goes out every month, he has his GPS location on the lake, and he does all the monitoring, and all of that information is, collected regionally. And so I don't know why something like that couldn't be promoted here. I don't know if the county probably would discourage that kind of thing, of having the the residents here being involved in that, to really get a handle on what's going on and where. So we'd have more locations for monitoring on the lake. But I feel that that would be something that would be helpful for us, and maybe bring in more information, so it would have to wake somebody up.
Yeah, that's the goal. I mean, people do say we've been monitored to death, but there are some areas that have not been monitored, and not only that, if we don't keep this topic hot with the Board of Supervisors and with the state, then, the regional board, then it sort of gets put into the background. So having some clear data and pictures and, the events of fish kill after fish kill, that's the type of stuff that, it gets some media recognition as well. Sorry about the music, we're going to have to talk louder. But it also, what do you say, outrage, damage plus outrage equals action. So the outrage factor has to be, made more vocal and beefed up a bit to really, we need to be speaking about these things and providing our information, our proof, and not stop until things change. And we're going to be part of that change, and we already are. There's already things happening that wasn't happening before. So,
Have to be a very squeaky wheel.
Very squeaky.
That's right.
Very squeaky. Mike?
I can't do it in 60 seconds. Hi, I'm Mike Dunlap, and Sarah and I have been collaborators and occasionally enemies.
Not anymore, though.
Not anymore. As my wife said, we live on the peninsula that does not end in Buckingham. Most of the people in the county don't know that this exists. I frequently tell people when they ask where I live, I tell them I live in the middle of the lake, not on an island. And that's what it is. The good news about the fish kill this year is, oh man, the tulies loved all that nutrients. So they are just looking beautiful. Sarah and I served together on the Clearlake Advisory Committee. I'm kind of proud of the fact that I was probably part of the reason that it was eliminated, because I kept insisting at the advisory level that we keep going back to the Board of Supervisors and telling them the truth. And when we did that, the response we got from the Board of Supervisors is, you've already told us that, we don't want to hear it again. And we would go back a quarter later and say, the truth still exists, this is what it is, you need to hear it because you haven't taken any action. And so they took an action. They did away with the Clearlake Advisory Committee. I am nothing if not outspoken about the issues having to do with the lake. Those of you that attended the water issue at the Lakeport office, I'm the one that stood up and said, it's all very well and good to have this Mill Creek Restoration Project. It's not going to happen. A, it's not going to happen in my lifetime, but B, the way the law is written currently, it's not going to happen, period, because there's no eminent domain, and we know that we have a minimum of 3 major landowners in the area that have said emphatically, we will not sell under any circumstances. And so that, that keeps getting held up as, part of the answer to how we're going to deal with Clearlake. It's not how we're going to deal with it. And that doesn't even address the the issue of, you know, trust lands for the Robertson Rancheria that would be flooded if it was done. I report regularly to Sarah when we have fish kills. Just like tonight, I came in and told her, you know, we've got Anabina this afternoon. The reason we have Anabina is we've had 2 days of east wind, and so the wind blows the Anabina back from the east end, from the Keys.
What's Anabina?
Anabina is a cyanobacteria, which is, I'm pretty sure Sarah's probably got a picture of it. Basically, think of little tiny green dots floating in the water.
So that could be a toxic cyanobacteria.
Yep. And
It
it's
has
one.
a name called Zolifospermia.
There you go.
Okay, now I know what you're
So, not the really nasty one we had a few years ago, not the Lingbia. It looks like ballpoint pen inserts locking together. This stuff looks pretty innocuous, and you know, I used to go swimming in it all the time. And the fact of the matter is, when you see the little tiny green balls, it is innocuous. It hasn't broken down. You know, you're not likely to have any cyanotoxins there, but when they do break down, that's one of the ones that can hurt you. So we've been here for 10 years. We bring a different perspective. My wife and I are both seaplane pilots. We own a seaplane that's sitting in our yard, so we've had the ability to look at the lake from the top down, rather than going out on a boat and looking at it at a rather oblique angle. I can testify to the fact that the lake has an actual current in it, which is created by wind fetch. If you're not a sailor, the waves that are created by wind are referred to as fetch. The longer the fetch, the higher the waves are going to be. And if you look carefully at the lake, because the winds are predominantly out of the northwest, when they come through the Narrows, we basically have about 14 miles of wind fetch. So on an afternoon when the west end of the lake is as flat as the floor here, we'll have 1 foot, 1.5, 2 foot waves. And frequently, you know, we'll end up with 12-mile-an-hour plus winds coming through the Narrows, which is enough to make whitecaps. It moves the bottom of the lake, literally. It moves. We've had measurably over 100 cubic yards of gravel moved from our property to the neighbor's property, just because the wind and the wave action just strips the gravel off the bottom of the lake and moves it. So as it does that, it exposes that gorgeous red earth that all the wineries want to grow their grapes in. And that red earth on the bottom of the lake is the same stuff. It's full of phosphorus, which is an element. It's not something that's going to go away. It's going to be here forever. And so in order to cure the beneficial uses need of humans for the lake, we're going to have to focus on how we deal with the water quality issue so that we're happy with it. Right now, the lake's happy. It doesn't care about humans at all. And so it's a hyper-eutrophic lake. It is full of nutrient. It's full of growth. You know, the fish kill is probably a result. I can't say absolutely, you know, absolute or theoretical, and therefore, you know.
We'll talk about that, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, we had massive fish kills this year because the wind brought them to us. So the tules, literally, when we looked out on our tules in front of our place, it was green tules sticking out of white. That's how many dead bodies there were floating on the surface. So yeah, get angry, people. Your board of supervisors is not going to do this.
No, we are.
There you go.
That's why we're here.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I've been coming here. My name is Jamie Vance, and I've been in and out of this lake since 1954. My parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents lived in Clearlake, so now they're telling us don't let your dogs drink out of the water or swim in it. And I see people down there all the time with little kids swimming. But they don't want them anymore?
We could sell them.
And we will talk about our toxin levels and what areas have higher levels, what areas have really had no toxins. And I think probably what some people are doing, but they might be avoiding or not paying attention to the information. But there are some spots. It's not like the whole lake has toxins on any given time. But then again, we're not testing the whole lake. We're only testing 18 sites around the shoreline. So at any given time, it could be higher or lower than what we tested for the day before. If you're 10 feet this way or 25 feet this way, I mean, that's the hard thing of it, is once the cyanobacteria blooms start, and once we know we have toxins in here, it could be higher or lower than our lab results at any given time, and so we have to really be aware of that. And this year, since we published so much of we put the results online, it made the county act. You know, the county then started actually doing press releases on it, and nixles, you know, and things like that for the first time. So yeah, so that was good. But
That's my dog that drink out of the water.
yeah.
Neither do I.
Well, drinking water is another thing we do need to talk about.
That's the scary part. It never seems to come up when they start talking about the toxins and the cyanobacteria. They don't discuss the fact that 70% of the county gets their drinking water from that lake, you know. Elem, I do monitoring on the drinking water. I have 6 of the 17 water purveyors that do participate because there are no water quality standards when it comes to cyanotoxins. They aren't mandated to test, but there are 6 of them that participate with the analysis that I do, and I do it every 2 weeks, and I get their raw water, the water that they pull from the lake, along with their treated water that goes out in the distribution system, and or out to the residents, and sample that every 2
I moved here
weeks.
4 years ago and I've lost over 100 pounds with sickness.
Yeah, it's, and you know, the 2 years going on the cyanotoxins for water purveyors, you know, analysis, and the higher levels we got were the years prior, so it's, in the raw water, so it's hard to say what was coming out of the distribution, you know, they don't know, you know, so that's the scary part, that they don't.
First year of my life, I
County
had
doesn't
vegetables.
talk about it.
Water.
There is a small amount of research on tomatoes taking up cyanotoxins if you're watering with cyanotoxin-laden water. There's no, we don't really put anything out about that because it's still, you know, there's not a ton of evidence, but this is, you know, if it ever were to be shown that that was the case, I think YOLO would probably jump on board right after that. So, also I just want to point out that the types of illnesses and symptoms that come from microcystin exposure, so it's one of the toxins that is primarily produced in the lake when we see it, is gastrointestinal distress and flu-like illness. Long-term exposure, microcystin is a liver toxin, so will cause tumors in your liver. So that's something to, you know, to always talk to your doctor about. We were recommending to everybody who said they were getting sick because of the smell or because, you know, potential exposure to the lake from swimming or whatever, that they need to let public health department know as well as their doctor. There is actually a study going on the lake right now. There's somebody from US EPA who's at Austin Park every weekend counting the number of people in the water, and they are looking at, I think they're looking at emergency room visits and clinic visits and making some, it's the very beginnings of a study, but some extrapolations about you know, how many people might be getting exposed to toxic cyanobacteria. The levels at Austin Park all this year, in previous years, was really high. Austin Park's actually had the most often has exceeded the safe recreating. You've seen signs about that, right? No, I'm sure you haven't.
That's so irresponsible.
I know, we presented to the city council and, you know, we don't have signs that'll scare people. That's why we put it on Facebook and just put it out there, because the county wasn't publishing our information, which we have with the lab results, it's really, so it's like, well, let people make their own informed choice about what they're going to do. But the last couple of years, the toxin levels have been relatively low on the lake, and even within the safe recreating standards, but, or not standards, but recommended guidelines. Anyway, sir, introduce yourself if you know. No? Okay. Ma'am?
I'm Maggie McGoulahan, and I'm here to tell you that I've traveled a lot of the world, over 40 countries, and I have to tell you that Clear Lake is one of the most beautiful places in all of the world that I have seen, and I would like it to stay that way. It frightens me a lot that we can't eat the fish, we can't go in the water, we have to watch our pets and our children from getting into the water, and now many people have given up drinking water from the fountain. So I wonder what an effect, what a long-range that is going to have, a long-range effect it's going to have if we don't do anything. We're going to see a lot of signs up, as you say, with these terrible messages about Clear Lake. We'll never get any more visitors to Clear Lake, and we'll never get anyone to plant their roots and live here. Now, I've lived here for 20 years, and I still feel it's one of the most beautiful places on earth, and we need to fight to keep it that way.
We haven't even mentioned the lowering of property values.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Okay.
Okay, the child?
My name is Latrell Lacey, and I'm a tribal member at Big Valley Rancheria. And I'm also the data specialist for the Big Valley EPA department. And I'd just like to say that the fish kill days, he said he has witnessed at least 5 fish kills. And I'd be very interested to have approximately those dates and other people to really pay attention to that stuff, because it is, like Sarah said, we can correlate it with other things that they're not paying attention to, you know. And I was thinking, after listening to Dunlop over here about the wind, we should have put the wind direction on our monitoring logs, because it does. He's saying, you know, it affects the results. And I just think that it might be very important. And it's important to know the symptoms of cyanotoxin microcystin exposure, because they can be confused with other things like flu-like symptoms. And you want to pay attention if you do go to the doctor so that you can report it as that you have been in the water. It's important to know if you've been in the water or near the water, or, you know, I guess it could, whatever, those things are important to identify that, because a lot of times people it doesn't get reported. Or if they do go to the doctor, it's just flu-like symptoms. And also just a couple more things, the tules, nutrient buffer ponds. I cannot say enough about nutrient buffer ponds. I think everybody should have a nutrient buffer pond. They're really, really, really great, and they're great. They clean the water up nicely, and they're natural, and the water comes in, and it leaves better than when it showed up. You know, nutrient buffer ponds and letter campaigns. You know, the art of letter writing is a dying art, and I've witnessed several letter writing campaigns where I've read them, and they're fascinating, and people have to be persistent, but I believe that they're truly effective, and now everything's in an email and stuff, but the written word, written documentation, when you write letters, it has an impact. And so, you know, I think that we've become, complacent or something like that when it comes to letter writing campaigns. I think if we, like you said, the water board, and I don't know about our supervisors, they're probably just the water board, supervisors aren't gonna, and I think that tules, I've been noticing in a long time that the places that they've removed the tules, but it's just like concrete and very stark looking shorelines are just like still and dead and just nothing there. But then, you know, 20 feet over here, there'll be like some beautiful new young tules. And it's just hopping with wildlife, hopping. I mean, it's beautiful. All kinds of birds are flying in and out of there, and the tules are very, very important, and if everybody on the shoreline took pride in their tules and had tules, I think it would be very helpful, you know, and it's something to think about, is tules. And that's all I wanted to say. Oh, and I'm glad to see so many people here. This is fantastic.
No more than in Lake Cortland. Yes, sir. Would you like to introduce yourself and briefly, you know, anything that you want to say about the lake?
Just quickly, just wanted to come and get informed.
All right, do you live in Clearlake area?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Same.
Thank you. And your folks.
My name is Steve Lynn. We've moved up here in 2012. And
that didn't have a place on the lake bought some property back in Morgan Valley. Because basically the lake kind of scared us. So we have a lake in Morgan Valley that all the water is fed from the property that we own, and it's pristine. I bath all the time, I love them. And just recently we got a house on the lake here. We always kind of turned our nose up to the lake because it's always drive over Lake Drive there, across the Cache Creek, and it just looked like a pea soup at times. But now we're on the lake over in Jago Bay in a beautiful spot. And we're here just to get informed and try to participate and see what we can do. We have tulies all in front of the property, and I noticed that it is clean. And when that fish kill happened, those tulies just sucked them up and didn't stink for very long. You know, pretty nice. We're here to learn.
I have a question though.
Yes.
Okay, if the water board isn't on our side, the public side, whose side are they on?
The state.
They're on the county side.
They're on
The
site.
county is on development side.
Development. Oh, okay, that answers the question. But are they appointed or are they elected, the board?
The regional boards are all political appointees, and the staff are career staff. The regional board does make decisions, and so those of you who went to that TMDL meeting in Lakeport heard them say that we are going to take this to the board in January, or February, or December, sometime in the next couple of months, and make their recommendation to the board, who are elected officials. I'm sorry, who are appointed, I'm sorry, they're not elected, they're appointed by the governor. I believe the regional board is appointed by the governor. The state board is too. So they're going to bring it for their votes on whether there's going to be a delay in compliance with nutrient management, which is what the Clearlake Nutrient TMDL is about. It's already 10 years old. Now they're thinking we need another 20 years, which means more runoff into the lake, feeding toxic cyanobacteria blooms and leading to fish kills. So yes, it's appointed people who are, and they actually represent quite a few,
Is it one per state, one per mile? I mean, how is that made?
I don't know how they do the regional. I mean, I know there's actually, I think there's 5 people on it.
That's what they said at the, sorry to interrupt,
No,
but
you know.
on the August 28th meeting in Lakeport with the regional board, they have
with their staff.
5 people to do the running around for the whole Central Valley district.
Well, that's not, she means the appointed people who get to make the decision. The board itself.
Water board.
Yeah, the water board. So there's the water board, appointed people, and then there's all the staff behind it.
Right.
So, but yeah, and I think what you're referring to is maybe
enforcement.
The one person that comes to check.
Yep.
Out of all the.
Yeah. That's the San Joaquin Valley, that's the Sacramento area, that's us.
It goes all the
Central
way
Valley's
up into
huge.
the Sierra Nevada foothills where we live in Grass Valley area.
Yeah.
So we're in the largest region of California, the Central Valley region. I mean, it goes all the way up to the Oregon border and quite down into the state. And we actually, it has the most tribes too. So from our end, we're actually talking to the tribes of the Central Valley region to put pressure on the Central Valley Board to be doing the right thing in all of our different water bodies. So yeah, they don't want to, there's not a lot of teeth in these things, and you would think that the permits that they give to the county and the cities for stormwater runoff would be tied to actually complying with other things, but at this point that's not the case. So that's actually a policy change at the state level, is how do we get more teeth in the Clean Water Act. Federally, that is going away, but the state at least, we're in California, so it's a little bit more green. So I'm hoping that, we can continue pressure on political establishment to just get more teeth in these permits and in these regulations that they have. So that took a while, but it was really good to hear from everybody. There's a lot of different expertise and interest here. So let's just jump into some of the questions that were on the Clear Lake water quality flyer that I want to address briefly, because it is stuff that people were asking about. So why are the fish dying? So fish need a certain amount of dissolved oxygen in the water. And the level that's been set by the state or by the regional board is 5 parts per million of dissolved oxygen. Anything below 5 parts per million of dissolved oxygen could be toxic to fish. And if it gets really low, like 2 parts per million, then there are actually gases, there's like chemical reactions that happen to the sediments that are in the lake, and there are gases that could also be toxic to the fish if it gets to 2 parts per million. So why does the dissolved oxygen level drop? And back when we saw a lot of these fish kills a couple years ago, the Fish and Game or Fish and Wildlife would say, well, it's because of dissolved oxygen. And it really annoyed me to hear that. But finally it's like, well, wait a minute, we can do something about dissolved oxygen, or maybe we need to be thinking about that. So why does dissolved oxygen drop? Well, nighttime is one of the times it drops, because oxygen is produced during photosynthesis. So when the sun is out, there's actually oxygen being produced. So a lot of fish kills happen at night because the dissolved oxygen has dropped, because there's no photosynthesis going on and no oxygen being produced. So that's a natural thing we're not going to change. We like the nighttime, we have to have that. So that's a factor. There's going to be a drop in dissolved oxygen. The next reason why dissolved oxygen drops is because of heat. When warmer water doesn't hold on to dissolved oxygen as much. So the warmer the water is, the less oxygen it holds. So in the summertime at night, or after days and days of really hot triple-degree or triple-digit temperatures like we had, it meant that we had not very much dissolved oxygen going, in the water going into the nighttime, so it dropped even lower. Corolla and I were seeing dissolved oxygen levels of 0.2 in multiple places on the lake. 0.2, okay? You need 5 to not be toxic to fish. So it's a wonder that we didn't have more fish kills, actually. The third reason why dissolved oxygen is dropped is when things are dying in the water. So there's a few reasons why things are dying in the water. The first is weed kills. So if you're using pesticides on the lake, or more technically herbicides that are killing the plants, you are killing a plant that then drops to the bottom, and as it decomposes, it uses up oxygen. So because we have policies of using chemical treatment on the lake, that's us property owners, our shoreline owners who hire chemical companies to do it, people who maybe illegally pour in stuff. The county is doing boat lanes and shore lanes to clear out areas for boaters. So there's weed kill happening there. And there's thousands of pounds of chemicals that are put in the lake for these reasons. Also, California Department of Food and Ag is doing the hydrilla eradication program, or more like hydrilla management program, because I don't think they eradicate it. And they're also putting thousands of pounds of various types of chemicals to kill the hydrilla and to keep it from growing. And so when those die off, then it is also using up oxygen. Cyanobacteria blooms. Cyanobacteria, or blue-green algae, is actually a bacteria. It's not an algae, but it does photosynthesis, so it's actually producing oxygen during the day. But when it's done, but not enough to really keep up with the low, the drops in oxygen that we have. But when it dies, and when we have a big bloom die-off, which is what was happening right before that fish kill, kind of during that fish kill, as it's dying, it's doing what every other thing that dies, it uses up oxygen. So we had kind of this triple whammy of weed kills and cyanobacteria kills, using up oxygen, as well as nighttime, which drops the oxygen, as well as the warmer temperatures of the water, which drops the oxygen. All of those things combined means that it's a kind of a perfect storm for fish kills. We knew that it wasn't, we saw a lot of species die. We often get calls when there are fish kills. The county does too, and they're like, can you go pick them up for us? And we're like, sure. Because we want to see these things tested. If we can send it off to a lab, or we can communicate with Fish and Wildlife and strengthen their protocol for what to do about fish and wildlife deaths, we're for that. So we've seen a lot of, we've been responding to a bunch of fish kills over the last few years. as well as getting water quality data at those locations and seeing these really low dissolved oxygen levels around the lake. If you saw just a few, the reason why we can say it is dissolved oxygen for these reasons that, dissolved oxygen has dropped. The reason why we can say that instead of, well, someone poured in a whole bunch of chemicals and that's what killed them, or the toxins killed them, is because it was happening all over the place for a lot of different species of all different sizes. It wasn't a virus which might just kill one species. If it was a spill or chemicals used, it would be really localized for where that spill or chemical was used. But when we saw dissolved oxygen levels super low throughout the whole lake, it's like, that's pretty much what happened. So, but we don't have to rest on, well, it's just a low dissolved oxygen and that's too bad. It's like, well, we use chemicals in the lake. Maybe we need to move to mechanical harvesting. So weed control is one of the things that we can do something about, and maybe we can have the county's permit revoked and say that in the summertime they can't use chemicals on the lake. They can only maybe do it in the spring when the temperatures are still low enough in the lake. We don't have the cyanobacteria blooms yet, because when you do chemical control for weeds, then it's added to all these other things you're doing in the summertime. It's going to lead to fish kills. And the county is out of, not just the county, but every jurisdiction here is out of compliance with the water quality standards set for Clear Lake for fisheries. I mean, there are fisheries here, and if you look at the water quality standards for Clear Lake, it needs to be maintained at 5 parts per million, and for fish that need cold waters, 7 parts per million. We break that all the time. There's so much data on that. It's unbelievable. So that's something we're actually pushing, and corresponded with a regional board recently to say the dissolved oxygen problem needs to be looked at in Clear Lake. But it is tied to policy changes. If we want to push for mechanical harvesting, which is basically like a mower that goes on the lake, it's more expensive than chemical control. That's why the county is not using that one. But they're also worried about little fragments of weeds that could grow into more weeds. But if you use a very small amount of chemicals or you skim it out, when you follow the mechanical harvester, it's a way to remove the weeds, compost. That's what we've been doing at Big Valley since 2007, actually, manually removing the weeds on our shoreline, throwing in a pile and dealing with it later. But it's actually pulling the nutrients out of the lake and not leading to low dissolved oxygen drops because we're pulling the stuff out. So that's the fish kill thing. Is the water safe to swim in? A few people were asking about that, and it really is a personal thing. If you've got immune system issues or illnesses, or you've got children, the state has set a couple of numbers of, I'll just write it up here. They say there's one of the toxins, the main toxins, if it's over 0.8 micrograms per liter, and they base that number on kids swimming and swallowing 250 milliliters of water over a 4-hour period or something, that if it's higher than that number, if the toxin level is higher than that number, then it could start to affect the health of the person swimming. So 0.8 is what the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, they're the fish advisory people too. They did a toxicology study on cyanotoxins, and they came up with that 0.8 micrograms per liter as the safe rec rate. Anything higher than that, you might start to see some issues. So in our years of monitoring for the toxin levels, we were seeing at Clear Lake Oaks was 16,920 micrograms per liter. Okay, so that's the highest we've seen on the lake so far, and that was in 2014. The highest we saw, and that was Clear Lake Oaks, 100 feet from the drinking water intake.
Really? 100 feet?
100 feet. Yeah, so then the highest that we saw in 2015 was, so that was 2014. The highest we saw in 2015 was about 10,000 micrograms per liter. That was the Austin Park. Okay, well then the valley fires happened, All the cyanobacteria disappeared and the toxins disappeared. And the type of cyanobacteria that we saw up to that point, we really haven't seen much of it since. Now we have a different type of cyanobacteria, so that doesn't seem to produce much toxins. And in 2016, the highest that we saw was 0.67, and that was at Sulphur Bank Mercury Mine. So in 2016, it dropped tremendously. Now 2017, we're not done with our monitoring year, but we did see
46 parts per million in Clearlake Oaks 2 weeks ago.
46, that's right. So we're moving back up. We've talked to other lake managers, and that's Clearlake Oaks, so two of the highest so far have been Clearlake Oaks. I mentioned earlier, Austin Park is where we've seen the most consistently above 0.8 than any other site on the lake. And it worries us because there's a lot of recreation going on in Austin Park.
Why don't they ribbon it off and say you can't go swimming?
Well, because the recommendation for this is to, at 0.8, to put up a caution sign that explains that there might be some health issues if you go swimming after that. And it's about drinking the water. It's not about getting it, absorbing it through your pores or anything, but about drinking the water. So anything, dogs getting in their children, or kids splashing each other or whatever. Oh yeah, here's the signs.
So they have 3 thresholds for microcystin levels where they'll put up signs for different activities that your water body may have. This is state produced, and they're now part of their recommended guidelines and their recommendations for any water body watershed management.
So you have designated areas where you test on a regular basis?
Yeah, we do.
Are those in Spanish also? I can't see from here. Is that little?
Not on her thing, but yes, on the State Water Resources Control Board site, there are Spanish versions and English versions. All the county or anybody has to do is print it out and put it up there.
I mean, but when they, have these posted, there's a big Latino community that
They do them in Spanish also.
Oh, they do.
And these are our 18 sites that we have listed, the green and the orange.
The county has only posted at a couple of locations a couple of times.
Hey, Sarah? So post Rocky and Valley and et cetera, fires, when the level went down, is there any conjecture even about potash? Because the entire county was blanket.
It's silica. That's what they're thinking, is silica. Because what we found in there, instead of cyanobacteria, was diatoms. And diatoms use silica. And so right now we're seeing mainly diatoms in the lake. So, because what we do is we go out, and I don't want to talk only about cyanobacteria, but what we do is we go out and get water samples, do some water chemistry measurements, take pictures, and record information that we see there. We bring it back to our offices and we look under the microscope, we see what kind of cyanobacteria is there, we identify which ones, what kind of toxins that those produce, and then we send off to a lab. Right now we are getting a free analysis from US EPA for 1 more year, and so that's why we've been able to do so much analysis this last year, is because we've had free analysis last year and this year, and we'll have next year as well. And after that they're closing the lab. Budget cuts. But what we'll do, we'll figure out. I think the tribes are still, they prioritize this. So it's the analysis really between the two tribes. We're spending probably about $25,000 on analysis per year. Yeah. For
so the fire runoff was beneficial to the lake.
It actually was. Well, not just the runoff at that point, but the smoke. And the ash that came from that and it's something that EPA is really interested in, and they've seen it up in Klamath as well, that after catastrophic wildfires, they actually see a change in the water quality to the point where the cyanobacteria is not present. So it's really odd, but as soon as the fires, we got really into fire season in 2015, and we were into, I guess, the Rocky Fire at that point. We went from the 10,000 micrograms per liter to no detect, all around the lake.
Is it going to boomerang?
Huh?
Is it going to boomerang now?
Well, I don't know. We have a different type of cyanobacteria now. It's Dolichospermum or Anabina. It can produce anatoxins, which is the toxins that have been killing all the dogs in the Russian River. We've only seen trace amounts of anatoxin in Clear Lake in all the years of monitoring that we've done, as we know. What we're seeing, it also produces microcystin, which is a liver toxin. So we are still seeing some of that in the lake, even this year, and as Paula said, 46 micrograms per liter. What other lake managers back east who have been dealing with this longer have said is that there's this change in regime, cyanobacteria regime, and there's really no rhyme or reason necessarily, but there is some science behind it. The kind that we have right now is a nitrogen fixer. It doesn't need a lot of nitrogen in the water. It can pull it from the atmosphere. And where's that picture? There you go. So these things, it looks like a pearl necklace. This is the type that we've had in the lake for the last 2 years after the fire. These little yellow things are called heterocysts, and that's the structure within the cyanobacteria filament that pulls the oxygen or the nitrogen from the atmosphere. The other types of cyanobacteria that we've had did not have that, so it needed a lot of nitrogen. So we're not seeing a lot of nitrogen, but nitrogen does break down with low oxygen, which is the reason why oxygenation of your shoreline is really important. And it was seen as a fix in some of the reports that have been, and studies that have been done in the lake, is the need to aerate your shoreline and oxygenate it. And that is something that we do at Big Valley, and it works. We see the dissolved oxygen levels go up, so we don't have the fish kills in that area. We don't see cyanobacteria blooms because there's a lot of oxygen, and it keeps that in the movement, keeps the cyanobacteria blooms from developing. And it prevents, the other thing that high oxygen does is it keeps the food, the nutrients that cyanobacteria likes, it finds it back to the soil. So we have a lot of runoff, and the phosphorus, which is coming from agriculture, is coming from soil erosion, it's coming from the fertilizers that all sorts of ag is using, it's coming from septic tanks. There's 1,000 of those around the lake that aren't maintained. So there's a lot of reasons why we have phosphorus in the water, but it binds to it comes in on soils. So once it's bound to soils, it only unbinds in low oxygen. So if we're doing oxygenation around the lake and spraying in water or having bubblers that come out from the bottom like a fish tank, that's what we have at Big Valley on our shoreline. It works great. We can show people how that works. The county actually recommended it when they first started, when the blooms first started, is let's put some aerators out there, get fountains. At the last meeting in Lucerne, there was a woman who had been, Cheryl, who's really promoting fountains, like colored fountains, and let's get solar colored fountains so you don't have to have lots of wires. And it's spraying out water, it's dropping hard enough onto the water that it's creating this movement and also creating oxygen in there. This is what they do up in her area. I think she grew up in Delaware, she said, and they were able to keep their chicken farm and the pond from having any algae, any
scum at all.
Scum, yeah, just from having fountains. And it's pretty too. If you can imagine a library park having cool colored fountains. And so I actually talked to Phil Moy, the county water resources director, who's relatively new, about what sort of permits would it take for homeowners to put in fountains, for the Keys folks to put in fountains. And it probably will take a fish and game permit and a lake bed management permit, but we should think about those things because they're not that expensive to put these in. Matter of fact, afterwards, if you want to look, I printed out some pages of different fountains and aerators that you can install on your shoreline, and talk to the county about getting a permit for it. And I want to actually help that process through for people, and that's something that we can talk about, in later meetings. Actions being aeration on the shoreline. So, because it does work.
The water providers are currently going after grants to hopefully purchase aerators around their water intakes to eliminate some of the cyanobacteria around their intake to help in their process also.
Can you speak a little bit about why they have to get a permit?
Who?
The county wants your money.
To put aerators in.
If you put in a buoy, even anything, because we did that because we hosted board stock.
A lot of people don't understand why they have to do that.
Because you're putting in something that could impede movement around the lake. So if you put in anything,
navigation.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
So, because the lake is a navigable water body, and therefore all the U.S. Coast Guard regulations that are applicable in the San Francisco Bay apply to the lake. Same way. So you want to put a buoy out there? I believe it's still $60. I'm not sure.
A year?
Per buoy. Period.
Probably per year, so yeah.
No, it's just one time.
One time payment.
Yeah.
How about a fountain?
Well,
Say it again?
Fountains?
it's a
Well,
generator.
it's a buoy.
A thing, yeah, it's a thing in the water.
That
So
could
you're
be
looking
done.
at one-time fee of $60.
Well,
Not
a
every
buoy is
year.
60.
The buoy is
You're gonna
60.
spend a certain amount of money, but think about the benefits. I mean,
No, no, it's not annual though, it's just a one-time.
Yeah,
You
and,
got-
and the thing
according
is,
to Mike.
you can't put them out further than 100 feet from the shore. So,
And you said that the county's gonna start doing this?
The water purveyors
No.
are looking at grants right now to assist in purchasing aeration units, and they're designing, the water purveyors are mandated to do a sanitary survey every 5 years, and they're using that report as a mechanism for grants, to apply for grants now. Because they are having such trouble with the source water and cleaning it and producing clean drinking water, that now they're having to they're jumping in and taking action, you know. Yeah, that's one of the things they're looking at doing is
It's
aeration.
actually cheaper to do all of the Byzantine work to get the bubblers.
Yeah.
So aeration is in terms of helping the lake, is something that was noted in 1994 in the causes and control of, I think it's called Causes and Control of Algal Blooms on Clearlake, and it was written by some UC Davis folks and other scientists who took a look at what was happening around the lake, looked at the low dissolved oxygen, looked at the fact that we did have cyanobacteria back then, although no one was measuring the toxin levels, or if they were, it was very, very limited. And they recommended that there be basically a twofold thing of controlling the erosion flow into the lake when it rains. So all our brown creeks, all of our hills that are draining into the lake with lots of brown rivets of water, and finding ways to control the sediment, the water we need, but we don't want the sediment, we want it to stay back on the land. And then aeration. So it's something that was, that the species cone that was recommended was these larger things that would pull up water and oxygenate the area. What we're doing at Big Valley and other people have done around the lake is you just do it in your own cove, just do it on your own shoreline. We have enough people who are doing it, it actually creates a change in the water quality because there's more movement going on. There's more movement consistently going on. And if you have solar power, then you don't even have to worry about electrical bills.
Would this aeration just be beneficial in the summer when it's hot?
no.
Well, I wouldn't do it in the winter.
Well,
Yeah, because you have cooler water temperatures, which means that there's higher dissolved oxygen.
and we have cooler air, which means that there's more oxygen in the air at night.
Yep.
You need to tell people what a species cone is and why it's different.
Why don't
want
you?
me to do
Because
it?
because I'm like, much knowledge.
Species is a gentleman, a doctor of water studies, I forget exactly what it was, but he developed a specific piece of equipment that, in conjunction with an oxygen generator, injects pure oxygen into a water column so that the water has a chance to absorb the oxygen before it's discharged at the bottom of the cone. So there are no bubbles coming up. What you have is extremely rich oxygen water, and it creates its own flow by virtue of the saturated oxygen water being heavier than the surrounding water. It literally creates its own flow. They're expensive to operate. An oxygen generator is an oxygen generator. It takes electricity. The fact of the matter is, in Lake County, we have, 321 or 330 something days of sunlight a year. It would not be that extreme a thought to say, let's set up a little solar farm here, where we have access to the lake, have a species cone, and have that circulation going on. It's way more effective at oxygenating the water than just putting, either aerating by spraying the water in the air or pumping air into the water and having the bubbles. Remember that the air we're breathing, talking with, is mostly nitrogen. And we don't really want to put more nitrogen in the lake, one way or another. So pure oxygen is the answer, but it's the expensive way to do it. But it's also been demonstrated to be extremely effective.
Right.
It's called space what?
Speece.
Species.
Speece cone.
But
You can Google it.
yeah, but if you S-P-E-E-C-E.
Yep.
One more time, please.
S-P-E-E-C-E.
Yep.
Now, what it would take for a homeowners association to put in a species cone, I have no idea.
Nope.
I mean, it would take permits and they might not even get approved. But aeration devices where you either put something in the bottom of the lake, which is what you put in like what you would put in a fish tank, a bubbler. We purchased one that had 2 bubblers that had 100 feet long of weighted line. It was $1,200 through USA Blue Books, and we turned it on in the morning and left it on all day, 3 or 4 days a week. We had it at Clearlake Vista when Big Valley owned Clearlake Vista. It used to be called Ferndale. The tribe sold it a few years ago. But when we took the cyanobacteria bloom in Soda Bay Cove, which is where we were, was much better in our area where we had our aerators than it was in other parts of Soda Bay Cove. Plus the toxin levels, I don't think got higher than maybe 8 micrograms per liter, whereas other parts of that part of the lake was much, much higher. So it's just, what do you call it, circumstantial evidence or whatever, but it does, it wasn't very expensive to do, and maybe as a, if you live along a shoreline in an area like Windflower Point or something, you guys might want to pitch in and purchase one of these things to put in there. And like I said, I really want to help guide you through the process. I mean, I don't know what it is either, but if you're going to do this, please feel free to give me a call or to give Corolla a call, because we're going to put some pressure on the county to, whatever we can do, to say, hey, this is a solutions-oriented thing. It does make a difference. It's proven to make a difference in terms of cyanobacteria bloom. It's safe to swim on your shoreline. And how about you, streamline some of the regulations with regard to it, or why don't you streamline some aspects of,
hopefully we could get like volume discount too. If we could get enough HOAs involved, then we could get a volume discount.
Well, and they really, they are relatively affordable compared to the cost of not being able to use your shoreline, because it smells so bad, you're scared to go in. So I guess the answer to is it safe to swim is, we've had some really high levels of cyanotoxins. When it gets that high, it actually is something that gets into the fish. It gets into the shellfish and the crawdads, which are things that tribal members eat. And we're actually involved in a cyanotoxin study of fish tissue right now to see what the levels are in different parts of the lake at different times of the year. So, but one of the recommendations on the sign from the state is that if there's a bloom at 0.8 micrograms per liter, you shouldn't eat any shellfish in that area because you can't remove the guts. But a regular fish, it says wash off and remove the guts, and then you can eat the flesh, or the fillet. So it's actually something that can get into our food chain. Hate to say that, it's bad news. And we don't have any data for Clearlake fish yet, but we will soon. As a matter of fact, we already did send samples off to EPA over the summer from 3 different fish kills, because they did want to see if there was any cyanotoxin in the fish that were submitted. So the next question is, what are some of the things that or who is in charge? It's a complicated thing, I guess, but there are some permits that the county and the cities have, and having to do with storm drain and stormwater runoff. And they actually have a certain responsibility to maintain the water quality as it flows into the lake. And so that's why we need to get on our elected officials and staff for our particular area. And down here in Clearlake, it would be the city of Clearlake. Because if they are allowing Burns Valley Creek to make, chocolate milk water into the lake during the wintertime, then you have to say, why does the creek look like this? What is happening on the land and on the shore going up this creek that is creating such a, all the soils coming down with it? Because those soils are bringing phosphorus. That phosphorus and nitrogen and other pollutants, and those things feed cyanobacteria blooms. So, and not only that, they feed weed growth. So it just creates this, bigger problem that we have to pay for or deal with later. So we need to ask what's happening on the land? What sorts of things, and so in terms of policy, what sorts of things are getting permitted? Why are the things getting permitted that are on hills that are this high? As you were asking, what are the BMP, what is it? How can they actually control the runoff from these vineyards? Well, the thing is, they're using best management practices, but no one goes afterwards to see, is it working? And I would love to see some of that monitoring happening. There is a little bit of monitoring that agriculture does that they're required to do, and that is happening in Middle Creek right now because that's the irrigated ag waiver that they have. So it's not, we don't have a whole lot of information about the ag that's happening in other parts of the lake at this point because they're not required to monitor. So, and we know for a fact that the Planning Commission or the Community Development Department in the county and in the cities, they don't go after a project to see, well, how's that looking there? So it's on us, to be seeing things and to report, if you want to do it anonymously because you don't want to bug your neighbors or whatever, go to that, file an environmental complaint if you're seeing a whole lot of dirty water. We want water to run down because that's part of the natural flow of things, but well, actually, we want to sort of sink it into the ground. So if they've disturbed all of the land there because they put it in a vineyard, they converted from walnuts to vineyards, then there's going to be a whole lot of land disturbance and you're going to have a lot of water runoff. And so it's actually not recharging the groundwater there. So, and we know that there's wells that have gone dry and lots of ag wells that have gone in and that have gone in 800 feet deep. I heard in Lower Lake, because we're friends of Fran Ransley, and she used to be on the board there, and she's the water district, and she said they had to go 800 feet down in Lower Lake from one of their newer wells to be able to get enough water to serve the public, and it was right after, I don't know, one of the vineyards there went in.
George Graham?
Gregory Graham or
Gregory Graham, yeah.
Six Sigma or something.
Around the Jacob Bay area.
Yeah. So, so there's things about the vineyards that is affecting the environmental health of this whole area besides just runoff. It's also water use. So who's in charge? We have responsibilities that the county and the two cities have. For the runoff, also Caltrans is responsible. They have to do projects to improve their runoff. Bureau of Land Management and U.S. Forest Service. So those guys are, have a lot of recreation going on up in their hills, and they sell their permits for the off-highway vehicles, and that helps create their budget. But it also means there's a lot of runoff coming from that area into the lake. So we need to think about that when we're talking to BLM Forest Service people is, you might get a lot of money in your budget for this, but you're also having an inordinate impact on Clear Lake water quality because all those highway vehicles and people that like to ride through the creek beds, a lot of ag does that. They just, because they don't want to have to take their tractor, all the way around here to here to get to it. So there's this old habit of, just traveling through the creek beds when it's dry, which creates, loosens the soil and creates potential for erosion. Also in charge.
What can you do about that?
Well, these are policy things. So this is where we have to get political. And
we have a neighbor in Morgan Valley that he has a racetrack through the creek.
I'm sure that's got to be illegal. So file an environmental complaint.
We're all silted in. I mean, I tried looking into it, and it's
Don't do it at the county level. Do it at state level.
It's silted in the creek so much where all the willows are. The creek runs through our field now.
Yeah,
it's a mess.
That's a big deal. I'd be happy to meet with you afterwards and help you through that process because you can report it. And then this winter, when you're seeing water come from that, so try to get be a detective and get some furtive pictures of things. And then this winter, when you see water coming, you can show. And we have to take it at the regional level, the state level, not the county level, just because it will, probably it will. You'll have
it doesn't make any sense. From Halcombe Bay, I remember a guy buying some property there, and he's going to go in. He's going to start cutting the willows out of the creek, and man, they just flip.
You're not actually allowed to do that.
You can't touch a creek.
Right.
It's supposed to have the shade and everything else going on.
Yeah, people who own the properties to the center of creeks like to maintain their rights, but they don't necessarily know a lot about their responsibilities.
Yeah.
And there's not been a lot of outreach about it either. As a matter of fact, I had reached out to Fish and Wildlife and also NRCS, and there's a local Lakeport office, about can you give us some pamphlets and stuff so we can bring it to people and say, here's some of the things that you're supposed to be doing to protect your land and the water quality that runs through, you know, if you're on a creek or lake. And I just haven't been able to get any. Anyway, we'll get there because I know they have to have some sort of one-page pamphlet. You know, they just have to have something. But yeah, you're not supposed to remove vegetation. You can't alter it in any way. There's a stream bed alteration permit that you have to have if you're going to do, you know, put in boulders so you can do, you know, walk across it or whatever. And I know a lot of people say it's too much regulation, but it's there for a reason. You know, there are environmental protection measures that happen when you do it right. Matter of fact, all these people who put in their wells next to creeks are actually drawing water from the creeks. Nobody seems to have a stream bed alteration permit for that, and they're supposed to. So there's all sorts of things that have been grandfathered in that have led us to where we are today. And sometimes you have to shine a light on those sorts of things to make some positive changes. You know, the regional board, a few of you have mentioned, well, how come the state isn't stepping in and doing more? And it really is because they often let, they let the local communities, they let the local jurisdictions sort of work this stuff out. They understand that the county is poor and they don't want to burden them anymore. Matter of fact, you know, people do complain when more regulations are put on them. I remember being at a Board of Supervisors hearing where the state was wanting to have stuff about septic system maintenance, and it's like the whole place filled up because everyone's like, we don't want our unfunded mandates from the state to have to maintain our, I'm like, you stupid folks, man. Because now what happens is you've got these failing septic systems that are putting nutrients right into the lake, leading to cyanobacteria blooms that are toxic. So you don't want to spend, you know, money to maintain your septic system. So the county, the Board of Supervisors actually wrote a letter to the state and said, we don't want to have to do this. We have a poor community here. It's an unfunded mandate. And sure enough, the state dropped it. So we have to think about the impacts of things. Right now, there's a push to track fertilizer use. And you better believe the ag lobby is really strongly trying to tamp that down. Mm-hmm. So these are things that we have to think about and be involved in. And you don't necessarily hear it just on the local news. You know, you kind of have to search through these things and find them. So, you know, we have now that we have an email list, you know, if you put your emails or your phone numbers on there, it's something that we can do is start to put out the word about various things when things are coming up that you need to comment on. I do want to put in a plug this TMDL, which is total maximum daily load. It's part of the Clean Water Act when you can no longer use the water for a certain thing like swimming because we have nuisance algal blooms or toxic cyanobacteria. There are fixes to it, and in this case for Clearlake, it was controlling the flow of nutrients or phosphorus and nitrogen into the lake, particularly phosphorus. So, as we were saying earlier, there was a 10-year, the state or the county has already had 10 years to comply and do more monitoring and do more fixes. And what's the last 10 years look like in terms of nuisance algal blooms?
The only one that's done anything is Caltrans.
Caltrans is the only one who, yeah, out of all of the parties that were held responsible, yeah, so out of Irrigated Ag, Caltrans, BLM, Forest Service, the county and 2 cities, they have, only Caltrans actually did the right thing,
put
did some projects. Yeah, and they
put silt fences in their
silt fences in their dirt roads, detention ponds, and they were able to show an improvement of the runoff from their property. Nobody else has prioritized it. None of our local officials have prioritized it. So the regional board is recommending another 10 to 20 years to become in compliance with the loading levels that have been set for these parties. So we have until October 3rd to get a comment letter in to the regional board, and we have that awesome meeting in Lakeport where 80 people showed up and brought bottles of their water from their faucet that was brown, or said smell like it was just terrible, and discussed the dead fish and discussed the problems they were having. So we don't want another 10 or 20 years. We want the county and the cities and Irrigated Ag and BLM and Forest Service, who are considered the responsible parties for nutrient control. that we want them to comply with the loading allocation that was set for them 10 years ago, because we don't want 10 more years of blooms, fish kills, inability to use the lake. And so the more people speak out, and so if you get your phone number or your email on here, I'll make sure to send out something that is a template and also leading you to more information. But even if you just call them, I think you can just call them up even, but it's better to write it because there's a record. So email them or write a letter, make a photocopy, and let's, and just get your proof of it. But to say 10 or 20 years is too long to wait. We've already had a dog death in the lake in 2013 because of toxin levels, and we've also had people's property values go down, and we've also had the inability, people don't feel safe in the lake anymore. Some of it might be, super, super, super cautious, but some of it is also because people are looking at it going, I don't want to swim in there. I can't bring my grandkids in.
I understand too that it doesn't have to be visible. I mean, the content can be really heavy and it can look very clear.
Yes,
right?
that's what their testing has shown, is that even if you don't see the visible bacterial bloom, it's still in the water.
So we put together actually a series of slides over the years, and then Corolla put it on this nice poster board for a few of them, that the bloom, because the toxins are in, so imagine like a water balloon, and when the cell wall dies, or when the cyanobacteria cell dies, the toxins get released in the water. And it can die for a lot of reasons. If you throw chlorine in there, which is why the water treatment plants are now filtering before they add chlorine, because they want to get the cells out that contain the toxins. If you chlorinate it first, they break open and the toxins will go through your water treatment, and it's harder to get the toxins out of water. But if you get it while it's still in the cell wall, and just filter it out, that's much better. So, but what happens is when the cyanobacteria dies, the toxins are still in the water, but you don't see the organic matter anymore because it's fallen down to the bottom. And so you can actually have toxin levels for up to 2 weeks after a cyanobacteria bloom that's been toxic.
Yeah.
And that's why the county's sign that says avoid areas that have blue-green algae blooms is not entirely complete. Yeah, so here's a picture of this dark green one. These top two ones are Austin Park at 2 different times. This had this was in July of 2015. This had about 2,200 micrograms per liter. Remember, 0.8 is what you want to be down to. And this had 10,000. So you can't really tell by what it looks like. This had 2,000, this had 10,000. Same location, different times. This was in August, this was July. This one, so that's high toxin levels and visible blooms. This one is a visible bloom, so it's a little bit different looking, but this says no detected toxins. But it still was very turbid, and there was a visible bloom there. This one, and that was in Austin Park. This one is Lucerne, and it's visible blooms with low toxin levels. So that again is pea green. It had a toxin level of a microsystem level of 4.6 micrograms per liter. So it was pea green, very thick, but the toxin levels were really low. This one is also a bloom, but low toxin levels. This is Clearlake Oaks, and it had that's 4.9. And then this bottom one, no visible blooms. This is the scariest. No visible blooms, but high toxin levels. You can see Corolla's boot right there. And it had I said high toxin level. It's not high, but it's 5.6, which is above that 0.8.
Well above the 0.8.
Yeah. And it is almost at the warning level. What the state has said is 0.8 for caution, 6 for warning, and 20 for danger. So that's in the warning level, but there's no visible bloom. So that is something that we need to keep an eye on, because if you've had a bloom in the area, chances are there's probably toxins there for a little while longer.
Yeah, for someone like me with an impaired liver, I can't go in the water at all. I don't even want to take a chance.
Before I forget this thought, you were talking about when you complain to write a letter. I wouldn't even bother with a phone call, but I think writing a letter or email where there is a record, because it scared the hell out of me when we were in Lakeport and they send these 3 secretaries. I don't know what kind of report they sent to their bosses.
Those are not secretaries. Those are very high-paid civil servants.
They did a summary. You should look at, if your email address is on there, or you want to, connect up with you, because there is a summary of the meeting, which you'll want to see, and how they characterize what we all said. And they did minimize our concerns.
You know, and why not have it recorded, you know, for record? And that's why I say,
That's
I
exactly
think
why
that
they don't record it.
the writing is the way to go, because there's something that, you know, isn't going to be erased.
Hey, Sarah,
Exactly, yes.
I'd like to encourage you, if you're going to write a letter to the Water Quality Control Board, CC it to your Board of Supervisors, who are, by the way, also the de facto directors of the Watershed Protection District. Oh yeah, you didn't know that? Because they get paid every month to be the director of the Watershed Protection District, whether or not they do anything. So you go to a Board of Supervisors meeting and you pick up the agenda, look at the top where it says that they are meeting concurrently as the Watershed Protection District, and that gets them paid every meeting.
I would just like to say, though, I have emailed Holly, and she opened it the same day. I have a mechanism on my email so I can tell if somebody's not opened it or when they opened it. And she replied the very next day, and you know, that she acknowledges that she received my comments.
And who is that?
Holly Grover.
So there's...
Yes, I
Yeah, so I just want to say that she is responsive, or at least she was for me, and that was last week.
And I did not hear from any of the other supervisors?
No.
And when I wrote to the city council members here in Clear Lake, one person responded, the other four, I think, did not. And her response was so embarrassingly awful.
Oh my God.
No, it was, yeah.
Yep, so it's on us. It's on us to do it.
So we have a deadline of October 3rd, and anybody who wants help with a letter like that, you know, take my card, make sure your email is on there, and we already have examples, like Kat said, she had an awesome one. She posted on
I'd be
Facebook
happy
even.
to share this. You can print it out, share it, forward it to whoever wants to see what I wrote.
Okay.
It's
And it's a
nothing
good start,
spectacular. but
because it's basically saying,
laying it out.
yeah, we've already waited, there's too many things that are being impacted by another 10 to 20 years of compliance.
Can't wait for another generation to get on top of this.
So let's talk about actions a little bit. We've alluded to a few, and we're about at the end of this, and we've had mostly me talking, so I apologize for that. But it starts, I think what it does is it starts that communication and thinking about some of the, you know, some of the ways that we can maybe make a difference, or it just gets, I think it gets the juices flowing. There are things that we can do in terms of actions, policy changes. This is more long-term, but this is stuff that we work on at the tribal level, because we know that ultimately that's how you do protection, is through policy changes. There's also some politics, like the letters about the TMDLs. But, you know, being here in Clear Lake, it would be great if there were a group of people from here who wanted to be a part of a couple of different things this fall and this winter. And that is identifying places where tules could be planted, because what those tules do, we really didn't talk about it, but what those tules do is they act as like a filter. It's a wetlands, it's a marshland, which when the water is coming through, and there used to be a wide swath of marshland or tules around the whole lake, we've lost 85% of them over the decades. But what those tules do is when the water is running through it, either from your shoreline or through the creeks, into the wetlands, before it hits the lake, is the sediment drops out, the soils drop out. And it creates a habitat, for one thing, but it also drops the sediment out, which has the phosphorus in it, the nitrogen, and other pollution that may be coming down from upstream. You don't end up with, you know, 500 feet of tules that you can't see your shoreline anymore. You can do some control of it, and you could even become a source of tules for people to plant, you know, in other locations. We've done that. We were the recipient of some wonderful tules from Mike and Lolita.
You haven't responded to my email the other day.
Oh, I know. I was in training all day yesterday, but yes. So the question was, so Mike asked a question about, you know, how can you plant tules? What are the requirements for it? I did talk to Phil Moy, and I said, and I asked on the other side of it just the other day, and said, are there any permits you guys would require for people just planting tulies? And he said, no. As a matter of fact, if you want help with this, we'll help you with it. So there are some, so we have some sources of tulies, which means removing tulies from other areas and basically cut a plug. And if half of you are interested in that, that's fine. But there's a few of us that want to do some tule replanting. There's other things that can be done too, in terms of letter writing, in terms of bugging our supervisors and demanding certain changes, and thinking of solutions that can happen with this bigger picture of how do we control runoff into the lake, and what sort of changes need to happen so that we have a healthier watershed. So how are we using the land? What are the best management practices? Are they strict enough? Is there monitoring happening afterwards? Are these septic systems, really ruining this lake? The millions of gallons of raw sewage have spilled in the lake over the years because of poor infrastructure, flooding, which happened this year. We need to come into, well, maybe not the 21st century, but at least the 20th century for some more technology here in Lake County. And then also come up with some other fixes that are out there. Daniel raised his hand, I'm still on my soliloquy, but permaculture. And there are people who want to who want to work on people's properties and do some pilot projects on how to improve the water quality coming off your land in terms of sediment control and keeping the water on your property so that you are actually helping your groundwater. Daniel has a permaculture background and is working with people, Fairlight and others, to develop a nonprofit organization. Maybe 2 minutes? You want to talk about that real quick?
Pretty
It's
quick.
Just an option.
Yeah, some of the solutions, I'm loving what the tribes are doing and how they could get some of these grants to start to apply these known effective things like overflow ponds and things like that. So through our nonprofit, we're going to try to bring more avenues of being able to do that and teach and share with the county and younger people and anybody who wants to get involved to do things like sinking water into the landscapes. Like permaculture is a design method that's going to mimic like natural patterns, so we could put a lot of water into the earth and up higher in the watershed, so it's going to trickle out slower and give a cooler, more oxygenated water supply. There's actually like millions of dollars worth of projects potentially that could be done to do that, and it's just to educate people how to do that.
Well, and the nice thing is we have so many different little areas around the lake that have different issues that a homeowners association or a set of property owners can say, we want to learn how to do this, and just do it. Work with the county to get the permits needed. But because we have these water quality issues, they're feeling a lot of pressure too. They're feeling a lot of pressure to solve some of these problems. So if there are you're talking about ways to sink the water that's coming off your land. I want to point out that the parking lots in a lot of our cities drain straight to the lake. So it's literally just drains in the pavement that goes underground culverts that has an outfall into Clearlake, and it's just bringing in everybody's car wash materials and broken down asphalt, cigarette butts, trash, spilled oil, spilled antifreeze, and everything else directly into the lake. How come there's no landscaped thing at the end of it where it can create some nice landscape? Or tulies there, or a nutrient buffer pond where it goes into a pond, fills up before it goes out. That's what we have in Big Valley at our parking lots. Or a storm scepter, or things. That's a policy thing. Why doesn't the county require, the cities require that every new development and every parking lot and anything new, start with that, has to have a way to control the stormwater, instead of just going straight into the lake, which a lot of it does. It's just a policy thing. We can actually put some pressure on them to say, we need to control stormwater better, because stormwater, and basically when it's raining and it's flowing down into the lake like it is bringing all these pollutants that are feeding toxic algae blooms, otherwise known as cyanobacteria blooms, and it is affecting our quality of life. This lake is used for so many purposes. It's used for, actually, the mercury levels in the fish are affected by the runoff as well. Because the more sediment, because organic mercury is in the sediment that is all around the lake, particularly the sulfur-based mercury mine. But as it flows into the lake and ends up in the lake, there's bacterial activity that turns it into methylmercury, which is then bioavailable in fish and builds up the food chain. So the organic mercury, the cinnabar, is not something that's as dangerous, but once it's bacterial action in the lake, then it changes into something that we can become, quite ill on. Matter of fact, the fish advisory for Clear Lake is basically women of childbearing age or children should not eat any bass from the lake, period. They can have 3 meals a week of catfish, bluegill, some of the larger fish, and they can have 7 meals a week in terms of mercury of clams, or 5 or 7 meals a week of clams and these much smaller things. Men can eat 1 meal a week of bass, and a meal is basically the size of your palm. So 1 meal a week of bass, and 3 meals a week of catfish and the smaller things, and 5 meals a week of, 5 meals a week of the smaller things. Yes.
It seems strange that the catfish, which is a bottom feeder, we can eat more of.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking too.
I know, but that is based on the mercury, the total mercury, or maybe the methylmercury levels that they've seen in the fish tissue. Well, we have a mercury analyzer at Big Valley, and we measure total mercury in fish tissue. Mercury attaches to protein, so that's why your drinking water is not going to have mercury. It's not going to have methylmercury, it's going to build up because it attaches to protein. So, so anyway, as they are analyzing the fish tissue, the amount of analysis they've done, it's the bass with the highest levels in Clear Lake. Now, any fish you eat anywhere is going to have something in it. There are calculators online, gotmercury.org, where you can put in your weight and how much of a certain fish you're eating, and they'll tell you where you are on the scale of whether you hit that or not, eating too much.
What is the watershed?
So the watershed is basically everything that flows into a water body and then where it goes out of. So the Clear Lake watershed is all the lands that are sloped to go down into Clear Lake through the creeks.
Right.
So that's Mount Canante right here. As you move out, like Hidden Valley is not in the Clear Lake watershed. Hidden Valley, so we're actually in the Upper Cache Creek watershed, which is a larger thing because Clear Lake flows into Cache Creek, and Cache Creek ultimately flows into the Sacramento River and continues on, and that the Upper Cache Creek watershed is Clear Lake and beyond. The Poudre Creek watershed is where Hidden Valley and Middletown and all of those, well, Hidden Valley is its own little man-made lake, but St. Helena and Poudre Creek flow into Lake Berryessa, or they flow together and flow into Lake Berryessa, and that's the Upper Poudre Creek watershed, or the Poudre Creek watershed. So it's basically, it's the hills and the lands surrounding a water body, and this is the largest natural lake in California, and so that's what a watershed is. So it's the lands that surround a water body. And
well, he said that there was property that was not going to be obtained for the, I thought this watershed.
Oh, so he was talking about the Middle Creek Restoration Project. So one of the fixes, like the main fix, the main fix that everybody's been banking on to fix all of our problems is this Middle Creek Restoration Project, which is basically to put holes in the failing levees that were put in to create agricultural areas in the town of Upper Lake. And what it did was it removed the marshland that filtered out a massive amount of water that comes in through here. Most of the phosphorus loading has been, through modeling at least, is showing that it's coming from the Middle Creek.
Really?
And the tributaries that flow into Middle Creek. So if you look at satellite photos of sedimentation loading, you see huge red areas here during the winter time that shows high levels of sediment. And then they proxy that and say, well, that's all phosphorus. But the Middle Creek Restoration Project, through the creating of, 1,500 acres of wetlands, I think is the goal of it. It then creates these filters to drop the sediment out so that there's much clearer water that's flowing in. Now, the reason why it's been what we call the magic bullet, Mike was saying it's just not going to happen. It's already been in the works for, what, 20 years?
21 years.
And it requires that all the property owners in the area who are going to lose their land because it's going to be flooded have to sell to, have to be bought out. And there's some of them that just won't. Matter of fact, they're like, over my dead body, will I ever sell my land to do this? And it's still another, there's still another, I think, what does Harry Lyons say? There's another $25 million of things that the county has to do, including moving PG&E.
PG&E's towers.
And putting in another bridge in the area. There's like infrastructural things that need to happen before they then go into $100 million, project that the Army Corps is the lead on. So it's been seen as this magic fix, and this is why the county and the two cities have not been in compliance with this TMDL. They sat on it for 10 years going, well, we're going to get this done. We don't have to do anything else because we're going to get this done. And they banked on it and they lost. So and that's why, and so the regional board is saying, well, this will get done within the next 10 or 20 years, so let's allow them to keep banking on it. And there are a whole lot of great movers and shaker people like Dr. Harry Lyons and others who are actually really pushing it and doing a lot of letter writing and doing a lot of stuff to make this thing happen. But there's still a lot more that needs to happen in terms of getting money together. As Mike said, there's big questions about eminent domain because the people who won't sell, basically, somebody has to say, well, you're going to sell no matter what. We're taking over your land, we're going to give you fair market value for it. But the fact of the matter is, when you look at the water runoff through satellite imagery, you see the ag lands, there's a lot of sediment loading comes into the Big Valley area. Tribe I work for, Big Valley Rancheria, is right here, right outside of Lakeport. So there's a lot that's happening here. There's also a lot of sediment, a lot of sediment coming in over here. But really, around the whole shoreline, there's hot spots, there's areas. We can't pinpoint and say, it's that property there, because there hasn't been enough monitoring to say it. Nobody wants to, get somebody in a huge amount of trouble, but if we work together as a, collaboratively as a community, and go after some helps for people, support the, if there's enforcement needs to happen, make it happen, let's make sure we go after that. But a lot of people just don't know. There's a lot of, when we went to the Lucerne meeting, there was a lot of people, and that's what these stickers are for, there's all these paper subdivisions that are up in the hills here, and there's just a lot of land that's not even being managed properly, and then the illegal grows that are happening up in those areas.
A lot of ATVs and everything.
That just
dumping
driving
garbage.
through. Exactly.
We're just a bowl, we're a bowl that's,
Exactly, yeah, we are. We're a bowl.
I mean, I just can't see where one spot is the magic.
Right. Which is why Habebatal Palmer of Upper Lake Tribe is also saying, and so their ancestral land is up in the Middle Creek area, and they are now doing a series of restoration projects and working with BLM? To do native plants replanting.
And Forest Service, I believe.
And Forest Service, okay. To do native plants replanting in various areas to create to create some of this these marshlands and buffers that are missing. Because there's been channelization. Over time, agriculture is like, we want this creek to go here. So there's been a lot of that, which means the edges are quite loose and unstable, and so that's why we've lost so much soils. But yeah, so there are various people doing projects, but not that many. So that's why we want to take this to the local communities to say, what do you want to do in your area? What's happening in Clearlake, and what we can do in talking and potentially meeting again, or talking on the phone or emails, is what do we want to do in the Clearlake area in terms of where are the hot spots that you guys see, and after this meeting you can come put some stickies up here, or just privately talk to us, or talk about it a little bit more now. But are there some spots where you really, those of you especially who live here in Clearlake, that you see are very problematic, that, whether in terms of agriculture or other land use, that you've seen a lot of soil erosion happening, and other forms of pollution that are happening that you know are affecting the water quality. So it's something to think about. What we want to do this fall and this winter is do some tule replanting, and if any of you are shoreline owners and you'd like to have some, be a part of some, even 25 feet of tule, they grow like weeds, once they're in there, as Mike can attest to. In terms of how do you get rid of, if you've got something you want to get rid of, there are furtive ways to do it, and there are probably, and what Fish and Game told me was that we have to run it through them. If you do have tules that you'd like to remove and reuse somewhere else, which is what we're trying to do. We don't want to get rid of tules, but we want to move into places where it's needed.
We want to propagate them.
We want to propagate them. Is that if it has the potential for a significant impact on the stream bed, then, or in this case, the lake bed, then they could potentially require a stream bed alteration permit. So I think it's a matter, it's stuff that they want to review and look through it to see if it's going to have that. Well, I mean, you want to, I look at those things not so much as bureaucracy as I do, it's also a checklist. So, because we've been doing things, off the cuff for a long time, and look where we ended up.
Yeah.
So how do we get the big money involved in this? I mean, let's face it, the vineyard has been coming in right and left over the last 30 years, the way I understand it. How do we get them involved?
The Wine Growers Association. And
I got that now.
Putting pressure, yeah, and saying.
They're pretty powerful, aren't they?
Well, yeah, they are.
That Thompson just posted that, oh, look, here's the great Wine Growers Association, and he's our rep. He's
Well,
our.
he's an organic wine grower here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go to one of those meetings. And
He posted it today on Facebook, and I said, okay, so have them give us some money for fixing Clearlake.
Well, the thing is, that if we, well, go ahead, David.
they all apply for grants. Since they're already ag, they could apply for 9,000, 10,000 or more grants that could put rain gardens and restoration projects in, which they do a lot of times. They just eke out a section and literally just leave it and call it a wetland. But we could enhance that with design.
But the way to make them want to do that and to put any effort toward doing that is to say, what are you guys doing to be, sustainable, or what are you doing? Prove to us that
You're being a steward.
You're not adding to the problem. Yeah, that you're being good stewards of the land. And if they, and there are some vineyards down here that are impacting the water quality in this area. Particularly in the Clearlake Oak section too, but
In a good way?
we, I mean, there's runoff happening. There's runoff happening. What is you guys are living Clearlake, what is the main land use that's happening? It's just basically residential, right? What is it, like 45 miles of dirt roads? 45 miles of dirt roads in Clearlake. So I know there's been Measure V paving, blah, blah, fixing all that roads or whatever, but it's not getting to the dirt roads, from what I understand. So this whole idea of dealing with, I think the problem in Clearlake, a lot of it is the dirt roads in Clearlake, the poor, oh my gosh, third world planning, or lack of planning, that has led us to 45 miles of dirt roads in Clearlake. So all those dirt roads that are horrible to drive in, your car will fall into a pothole, and it won't be seen for 6 years. Those are pouring a tremendous amount of soils and dirty water into the creeks that are nearby. There's like 5 creeks that feed the Clearlake area, Clearlake shoreline. So putting some pressure on and coming up with solutions to start paving those roads. That it has to happen, or some landscaping off the edges of them where the creeks are, or in the shoreline area. So I think we need to do some monitoring off the dirt roads in Clearlake this winter. So if you have suggestions about roads that are really bad, where we can do, which either go through a culvert or go into a creek, we can take water samples right there. We can put some bottles. It's not that expensive. We already have water monitoring programs. what happens in one part of the lake could affect us in another part of the lake, so it's something that's legitimate for us to spend a little bit of money on. But we can, so dirt roads is one of the big deals in Clearlake. And then you guys also, just the currents hit you here. You have just the poor, it's as Mike
Well,
was
it's the
saying.
only discharge.
Yeah, so we're the last ones to get the water in the lake. It comes down to here last. And that's why we're having the higher levels of toxin levels.
Is there anything connected to the drought that we did have, and then, so wineries are being put in and all this, agricultural stuff, and then all of a sudden we get this really, really good rain, and I mean, we just get everything dumped.
And the fires, 20% of the county burned.
That sounded good, though.
But it loosened a lot of soils. So yeah, it changed the type of cyanobacteria, but it loosened a lot of soils that used to have vegetation on it. So a lot of phosphorus entered the lake, a lot of soils entered the lake.
I'd like to make a comment.
But like the potash, Mike said.
Make a comment. One of the things that can be done are cover crops in order to protect the soil, even when during the winter months when it's more exposed.
And they're required to. So the ag is already doing cover crops, right? So they say what they're doing is enough.
Once again, though, it's a monitoring.
That's not necessarily enough, but it's one of the important tools.
Yeah.
And it is very cost effective, and agriculture department helps subsidize some of that cost sharing.
So to link it back to how do we get them to do anything? How do we get the big money here? How do we get the agricultural community to buy into the need to do more? And we haven't proven, and there's no one is saying for certain that it's agriculture, but there's a lot of evidence that, there has been a 47.5% increase in vineyards in the last 10 years. I looked at the ag crop reports from the ag commissioner, 47.5%. Some of that has been conversion from walnuts, but you are disturbing the soils, and so they do BMPs. They put in cover crops. They do they move their rows so that there's less of a flow down. There's a certain amount of monitoring that goes on, but really nobody's checking on, and there's also fertilizers that are added, and nobody is checking on what the runoff is from any of these land uses. So,
really?
We're talking about writing
I'll be on it
letters
this
to
year.
the people, and I think that's obviously super important. But can we educate the public too about the tulies and how important they are, and their responsibility with pesticides, and can there be a general education of the public?
It needs to happen, and the ways to do it is to start start talking about it with friends and neighbors online, and then as a community start bringing it up. So go to Board of Supervisors hearings or City Council hearings and say, how come nobody's talking about planting tulies, or how come nobody's talking about cover crops on ag, and we're seeing some ag here has no cover crops going on, or how, and start to bring up the land use stuff. So go to meetings, and then as a group, whatever kind of comes from these 3 meetings that we've had, if people want to focus in on certain areas, we can, there are some pamphlets that are out there, and I agree with you that the more education that people have, it's not like people are bad, they just don't know. A lot of things are
Actually, it should be putting crops of tulies in.
With this bigger problem as this is, how come this meeting isn't larger?
This is
I mean,
everybody's.
I'm looking at a few letters here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a big lake, there's a lot of people here.
But don't get discouraged, if you get discouraged about, trying to make changes because not everybody's doing it.
I've been trying to do it for years. Believe me, I know all about it.
I'm happy about this, I think this is great. You guys you've doubled, you tripled the amount of people that were in Lucerne.
Yes.
So yay. And there's a little more than it was in Lake.
Well, it is a big concern, that's why.
Yeah.
Nobody, people don't know about it.
And you guys
Everybody knows.
You guys are probably feeling it worse than anybody because of the blooms and the toxic levels of the toxin levels that have been down here. In terms of the toxin levels, we made this nice chart. This is only 2 years worth. It's way too small to see, come back there. But this is all of our sites that are listed, and we have whether they're in the upper arm, Oaks arm, or lower arm. And we have how many times that exceeded that 0.8 micrograms per liter or parts per million. That's the same thing. And we found that, so the Oaks arm had exceedances 90% of the time, 78% of the time, 40% of the time. There were a lot more exceedances of the 0.8 in the Oaks arm, in the lower arm, than the upper arm. So we have a lot of sediment coming in here, and most likely a lot of phosphorus coming in here. But it is traveling down through the currents, and you have a sink here because of the Cache Creek, and you have low oxygen. Is it really shallow? Is that what it is? I forget how.
It does get shallow, yeah. It's
Warmer water, more shallow.
West end shallow.
Yeah.
Well, in
Did you go Bayside?
No, the other.
Oh, up the other arm is shallower?
Yeah.
But I know through the years it's pretty shallow.
Well,
That's the only discharge, though. That's where everything goes.
It's the drain.
We are, we're the bottom of the toilet bowl.
Downhill.
7 to 11 feet,
Okay.
right there.
Yes.
Where's the
Yes.
We all
Deepest?
know it.
There's a deep spot here. That's right. There's a deep spot here. There's a deep spot down in Jago Bay. We got 39 feet, 100 feet out from our property.
Oh, nice.
The Oaks, we have 30 feet off right here.
You know.
Very cool.
But I gotta say one thing. I want you all to think about one thing. Those two both work for tribes. And so that means that they each represent an entity that has to get along with the county. So Sarah speaks carefully. I don't have to get along with anybody. You want to hear how bad it is? I'll tell you. Sarah will vouch for the fact that I don't care. If I'm going to put a sticker on that map, I'm going to put it on the brown spot on the southwest corner of the lake. That's Lakeport.
Yeah,
that's the biggest problem right there. It's called the Board of Supervisors.
Well, why
throw the bones
does
out.
Clearlake keep electing the same person?
Which is why it's important to go to the state board, the state water board and the Central Valley Water Board. I mean, changes can happen. When I came in, there was already a movement going on with tribal beneficial uses of changing, adopting a use into the state water board for tribes, for subsistence fishing and cultural uses of the water. And I mean, it took, 5-7 years of just diligent stuff. But I mean, every time we were at the state water board speaking in front of the state water board, there was lawyers for the wastewater discharges, lawyers for all the, ags. And I mean, the room was full of lawyers. And it was just, environmental directors and tribal members there speaking. And it got passed. It got passed finally. I mean, it took time and it took diligence, but it can happen. It can happen. And the boards do want to see that happen. Not the Lake County board. I can speak straight up because Elem has no economic development in Lake County, so it doesn't matter. The Lake County's Board of Supervisors is a joke. I'm sorry, so is the city's. But it's just a good old boys club, but backroom deals going on, and it's
But
really
the good
scary.
news is we have two relatively new representatives to us. Our Congressman Garamendi actually understands something about water because he lives on the waterway. Okay, and our new gal from down Woodland Way. Cecilia, who is very open to being talked to, and so she understands the concerns.
Yeah,
I did
it's
reach out to
important.
Garamendi and said we'd like to
State
do some presentations and had nothing.
It blows me away that the city says, oh, how can we improve tourism? This is when I was younger,
This is the tourism generator right here.
70% of all of Lakeshore were resorts. And you get 3 years of bad water, and it's understandable that these people relied on 4 months out of the year that resort was booming. And so you get word of mouth that the lake turned. Nobody comes. I mean, I talked to my wife. We were out fishing one time And it was a holiday weekend, over by Redbud, really, where boats are supposed to be coming in and out, you gotta really watch. We were the only one on the lake.
Yeah.
It was scary.
Dave?
Yeah, I wanted to bring apart how we could maybe get the tourism kicked back in with the ecological portion added onto it, because if we're known for a county that's trying to heal itself and fix itself, and these things are going on, people want to take part in that and learn it and do it. Like, that's what I do when I go around to all these places, like the Convergence you guys should all check out. And it's just it's a new thing that these kids actually believe in, because they want to have an impact in this world, and they don't want to do the same old thing that's doing, the damage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's different, what's great is that there's so many different options, and I can see the younger folks being, maybe more of the tulip planters, more active, and those older folks being the ones that wield the political muscle. Getting ag on board, getting the Lake County Wine Commission on board to go, why don't you guys take more of an interest in this lake? And what can we do? How can you please prove to us that your practices are working? Prove to us, prove to us.
I want to tell you one more little story from that meeting in August, at the end of August. I happened to be sitting right next to the executive director of the Lake County Farm Bureau. And she was making snide little comments anytime we brought up the wineries, the vineyards, the land disturbances for the clearing for the vineyards. And she was just, no, they don't do any fertilizing and yada, yada, yada. So don't expect any help from that.
Didn't she get up and speak?
She did.
She did, Brenna Sullivan.
And she owns and rides horses around the Big Valley.
You said that there's been no national interest or something in this lake, because I heard about some place over in Napa County that, like in the last couple of years, was made some kind of national monument.
The wild and scenic, there are designations that can happen.
This is
Snow
like
Mountain and Cache Creek.
The oldest, from what I understand, lake in North America. Mono might be a good. Why is there no national?
Well,
I mean, this is
that happens because the people make it happen.
Right.
So the people have done.
Is it worth it? Because
I think we have to show that we want to take. My personal opinion, we have to show that we're trying to take care of it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you would think that the staff and elected officials would really take an interest in it, but we have been fighting them for years to even put signs up. We fought them for years to even use our data, and it's not that it's our data, it's lab data. It's lab data with toxin levels, So if you don't want to put those out, whatever, but
Well, they don't want to scare people. They've been scared. They don't come.
They don't come, exactly.
They're already scared.
They already know. Yes.
Word of mouth passes quicker than anything.
So in terms of, there are federal grants. There are federal grants that are implementation grants, and they're based on watershed plans. So if but here's the thing, for a watershed plan, you need to know your pollution sources. And by pollution, it's not just, like oils or something, it could be just soils. But you have, the fact that the county and the two cities have been lagging with that and not prioritizing that means that we can't go after, and the county and the two cities can't go after these grants to do more implementation projects, restoration projects, septic system repair projects, tule replanting projects, erosion control projects, creek stabilization projects, and those are all the types of projects that come with these 319 Clean Water Act grants. So if you don't have really specific plans in place where here's a hotspot, here's a hotspot. So kind of what we're doing is we're helping the county and the cities help us. The more data that we have and the more where we're pointing to it saying this is a problem, and the more here's proof of the problem, that is showing the glaring need that they can start to put into grant. And there are, nonprofits can apply for certain grants as well. There are certain grants that tribes can apply for. Yeah, so get on it, because there's some good grants. The Rose Foundation, I got a $5,000 grant. I used to have a show on the KPFZ, the Water Hour, and spoke about this stuff for a year. And that was like 4 years ago. So we got a $5,000 grant from the Rose Foundation to just do, and we bought water monitoring kits. I had water monitoring activities, and probably, I don't think any of you were there, but we went around the lake and we had different water monitoring things going on. So it was kind of cool, and just not a whole lot of people came. Oh well. But yeah, there's some monies. You can start with a little bit of monies, a little bit of seed monies, even as a grassroots organization. So, and then once you start doing that and showing that there's a movement happening, there's also citizen science. There was a training the other day, and was it yesterday? It was yesterday. Okay. So we hosted at Big Valley, and I'm sorry that this meeting didn't happen first because I actually invited community members, tribes, and city staff, and nobody from Lakeport showed up. But and I didn't invite the county, so. But to learn how to do a beach survey, to show pollution sources and problem areas for our beaches, and we can actually do that, set up some beach areas that we want to monitor this next, well, they're saying we should do it in spring. So there's some data that we can accumulate as a group, individually or together, which can be part of creating this compelling narrative. Here's some problem areas, and we want you to put some budget monies to fix this. That's what we need to do. Yes.
We seem to jump a little bit at the Facebook posting and stuff, and I definitely want to take part in videos and getting part of all this information to more people as much as possible, so I think that'll also help us.
That is a great idea. Yeah, making it more visible that there's a lot of people acting on it. A lot of people doing this.
Getting it out there, there's the people like me who have been boning up all summer on just getting the terminology and trying to understand the Byzantine relationships between the state, federal, and local, blah, blah, blah. And we're people that you can approach and ask questions. And maybe it'll come up to you later. Or maybe you don't have the words for it yet because it's all new terminology. But you can reach us on Facebook. You can call us. I'm in the phone book, Kathleen O'Connor in Lakeport.
Right on.
Yeah. And building a group of people who feel confident to be able to work on these things. And the fact that you all have taken a couple hours of your night to be here is wonderful. And sometimes it's because you felt in your family, the impacts of the water quality. And sometimes it's because your property values are going down. You're like, what can I do with it? Sometimes it's just because of passion. I want to see things change, especially for the younger generations. Or maybe this is not how I used to remember it. This is so much worse, and now I don't even feel safe going in there anymore. Or I've seen the changes, and I want to make a difference. So how do I do it? We have all those stories here, and we can do things with it.